The relationship between South Africa and the United States has swung between strategic cooperation and intense friction, shaped by historical tensions and recent political dramas. Once strained by apartheid-era sanctions, ties improved post-1994, but under Biden, tensions have escalated. The U.S. frowns on South Africa's vocal support for Palestine and its ICJ case against Israel, while Pretoria resents Washington's perceived meddling. Elon Musk, a South African-born billionaire, has fueled controversy by criticizing SA's government, sparking backlash. Meanwhile, AfriForum and the DA's visit to the U.S. raised suspicions of seeking foreign interference. Diplomatic spats intensified as U.S. Ambassador Reuben Brigety, after accusing SA of arming Russia, resigned following backlash, while former SA ambassador to the U.S., Lana Marks, saw her term cut short under Trump. With growing BRICS alignment and shifting global power dynamics, SA-U.S. relations teeter between necessary partnership and looming political divorce. Under the Trump administration, South Africa's ambassador to the United States Embrahim Rasool is no longer welcome and considered persona non grata,
The diplomatic tension between the White House and Pretoria seems to be widening. In the latest, founder of the Sharad Hadin Israel Law Center has claimed that the Trump administration is probing allegations that African National Congress leaders were bribed by Iran to take Israel to the International Court of Justice for genocide. In the interview to a South African online business news, the president of Israel Law Center said that a group of 160 lawyers is calling on the American authorities to conduct a probe. She also adds that although they did not get any response from the Biden administration, there has been action from the Trump administration. She says they are demanding that the U.S. use Magnitsky Act to sanction South African officials if they are found guilty of the allegations. Now, this comes just days after ANC's first Deputy Secretary General hosted the Iranian ambassador to South Africa at the ANC's headquarters. The ANC leader called Iran a fraternal country that she is proud to associate with. The ANC said the party discussed strengthening bilateral relations and fostering political cooperation with Iran. And for the latest, our correspondent Kalden Ongmu has sent us this report from Johannesburg.
Ambassador's meeting with ANC officials took place here in Luthuli House, which is the ANC headquarters. However, despite several allegations on the ANC, officials remain undeterred. ANC's first Deputy Secretary General Nambula Mokonyane said the former liberation movement has strong historical ties with Iran and they will not hide their friends. However, this was not taken very positively by some concerned South Africans, saying that if Pretoria wants to repair relations with the U.S., it must stop cozying up with the enemies of the West. Trump and Pretoria are locked in a diplomatic row over a land expropriation act. Last week, the Republican leader once again reiterated that South Africa's new land reform will lead to the takeover of white-owned farms. The South African presidency swiftly responded, saying in a statement that it would not engage in counterproductive megaphone diplomacy. This is Kalden Ongmu from Johannesburg, South Africa for WION World is One.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Let's move on now to this story coming in from the U.S. and, of course, indeed being the breaking news that we see online. And, of course, tensions have escalated between South Africa and the U.S. The Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, has just posted on X that South Africa's ambassador to the U.S., Embrahim Rasool, has been declared persona non grata. For more on this, we're now joined on the line by U.S. correspondent Nick Harper. Nick, thank you so much for your time. Certainly breaking news coming in this evening from the U.S. We now understand that the South African ambassador, Embrahim Rasool, has been expelled.
That's right, yes. An official statement coming from the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio on social media saying that South Africa's ambassador to the United States is no longer welcome, he says, in our great country. A slight spelling mistake, but Embrahim Rasool is a race-baiting politician, Marco Rubio says, who hates America and hates Donald Trump. We have nothing to discuss with him, and he is considered persona non grata. Now, that is the official terminology for when an ambassador to another country that resides in that country is essentially facing expulsion. They are no longer welcome here in the United States, and they are not accepted within the role that they are carrying out. The US saying that they will no longer accept Mr. Rasool in this position of ambassador, and therefore he is likely to be recalled. This following videos that he posted earlier in the day on Friday that essentially detailed what he saw as problems with the United States. He spoke about the shock and awe tactics of the Trump administration over the last 7 or 8 weeks, the number of measures that they have been implementing, including cutting tens of thousands of jobs. But he also spoke about a supremacy assault by the Trump administration on multiple departments, and of course relations with South Africa during the last 8 weeks since Donald Trump returned to office have deteriorated dramatically. This now being, it would seem, the final nail in the coffin with the expulsion of the ambassador.
And Nick, one would even ask, I mean, certainly quite historic moments taking place in the Trump administration and in the US. Has South Africa ever seen one of the ambassadors being recalled by the US?
Well, that's not clear, but what certainly is clear is the fact that we have seen such a dramatic deterioration in relations, considering that these two countries, the United States and South Africa, up until recent months, had been considered strong international partners in multiple areas, whether it came to international trade and the economy, whether it came to diplomatic foreign policy relations. There were certainly ways that the two countries had worked together. But going this far to make such a strong statement on the international diplomatic stage really suggests a complete breakdown between the United States and South Africa when it comes to the relations between the two countries.
And what will this have when it comes to, you know, the relations between the two countries? What impact will this have between the US as well as South Africa?
Well, detrimental relations now will be in place between the two countries. I mean, this destabilizes any sort of relationship that South Africa has had with the United States up until now. We have seen, of course, during the last couple of months of Donald Trump's return to the White House, very much a nationalistic approach with that America First policy front and center. His critics would suggest that he is trying to blow up relations with all international partners and allies. We've seen pushback with NATO countries, with European allies, even the nearest neighbours of Canada and Mexico, with multiple tariffs imposed on them, many of them now currently on pause, but still very much a destabilising effect over the last few weeks since Donald Trump returned. And those normal relationships, which I guess so much of the world, including South Africa, has relied upon up until now, are simply being undone. And those relationships that have stood the test of time would now be in a perilous position. This relationship now, it's unclear whether this can be overcome. A new ambassador will, of course, have to be appointed. But you would imagine that that ambassador would have to undergo significant and serious vetting to establish whether or not they would even be accepted by the United States, and whether that ambassador could potentially recover relations between the US and South Africa.
Is there any further reaction from the US following the news from Marco Rubio there?
Not that I've seen so far. Much of Donald Trump's afternoon has been dominated by a speech that he was giving at the Department of Justice, talking about trying to attack and, if necessary, prosecute political allies and adversaries. He has not weighed in, at least not that I've seen. I mean, it's likely that we could see other Republicans as part of the Republican Party getting involved to also express their reservations for this ambassador, to show their support for Marco Rubio. In turn, we have, of course, seen other Republicans in recent weeks very much backing up the Trump administration's dealings with South Africa. Those comments, those reactions are likely to come in the coming hours.
And Nick, I understand that right now, you know, the information can be quite limiting right now as we speak. And maybe if you can give us a bit more further information, do we know when exactly Mr. Rasool will be expected to leave America?
Well, normally in these type of situations, when an ambassador is deemed to be a persona non grata, that is something that takes immediate effect. It is unclear exactly how quickly he would be expected to leave the country, but the implicit implication in all of this, that it is as soon as possible. Now, it's not normally the case that ambassador would be frog marched to the airport and put on the next available plane home. But the expectation is that essentially relations between that ambassador and the country that they've been living in is severed almost as quickly as is possible. So we're heading into Friday evening here, Washington time. There is a chance that he will have to clear out of the residency in Washington during the course of this weekend and head home. We don't have an exact time frame of how all of this will play out, but from the United States point of view, this statement from the Secretary of State is final. There is no suggestion that they will back down from this. It is the ultimate in terms of diplomatic relations, in terms of diplomatic endings. This statement being very much the final word from the US administration. Marco Rubio also in that statement making it clear that the US had no further the things that it would be willing to discuss with the ambassador as part of considering him now a persona non grata.
And how long can it take before South Africa, you know, can have the ability to replace Mr. Rasool in office, if you are saying that this is almost immediate?
It's not uncommon for countries to have periods where they do not have an ambassador in place with a particular country. I mean, here in the United States, we're going through a change of administration. The Trump is still working its way through its list of nominees that it wants to be ambassadors to various countries around the world. Some of these people just being suggested during the course of this week, and we're obviously 2 months into the Trump administration. So sometimes there are, I guess, fallow periods where there will be roles of ambassador in various countries that are not filled. I guess the determination now is on South Africa to see how quickly they can find a replacement candidate. Now, they may have someone already standing in the wings, but they will need to very much know that that person can work with the Trump administration, someone that is able to heal these divisions rather than making them worse. And I guess that will now be part of what will be an almost immediate vetting process that will need to take place. That really trying to establish whether the new candidate, the new ambassador, is in the right type of position to heal the wounds between the two countries rather than just sowing greater division.
All right, Nick, thank you so much for your time and for that insight. That's U.S. correspondent there, Nick Harper, just giving us the breaking news coming in this evening, of course, with the ambassador of South Africa in the U.S. Being recalled by Secretary of State Marco Rubio.
Well, Sandalil Swana is a South African governance specialist and political analyst. And I'm pleased to say that he joins us now from South Africa. What can you tell us then about the relations between the US and South Africa?
The relationship between South Africa and the United States of America has been damaged by the efforts of South Africa to take the state of Israel to the ICJ, and also by taking Netanyahu to the International Criminal Court of Justice, for genocide, for war crimes. So that has actually the core of the dispute between South Africa and the United States.
Yeah, so is this very much to do with Israel then? Is that at the heart of this, as you just mentioned there?
Yes, the conflict between South Africa and the United States of Africa is about the steps that South Africa is taking to address the genocide in Palestine, which is being conducted by the State of Israel. That is the core of the conflict. There is not really any other basis of the conflict.
Yeah, and what ramifications, though, will this have now, particularly for South Africa? Because the US is such a dominant force, isn't it, in terms of its finances and the finances that it gives out, and in terms of diplomatic relations. It's so powerful.
Yes, the United States has always been powerful, but you'll remember that the Rasool comes from the African National Congress, the politics of the left in South Africa. That political school of thought represents more than 2/3 of the majority in South Africa. And in the fight against apartheid here in South Africa, the United States was not a supporter of the African National Congress. They supported the apartheid regime, and Rasool continues to point out that the behavior of the United States, even now, is to support apartheid and genocide. So there will be ramifications, but those ramifications, since we were born, we lived under those ramifications, especially as Black South Africans.
I mean, in terms of those ramifications, will South Africa representatives or the government there, will they be worried about this? Will they be concerned?
Obviously, when you're in a state of conflict, you have reasons to be concerned, but the question is whether you'll abandon the struggle or not. I do not see the South African Parliament voting to drop the case at the ICJ or drop the cases at the ICC. That is not going to happen. So whatever sanctions or any other actions that the United States takes against President Ramaphosa or against any leaders of the ANC are of little consequences. A little consequence, it will be like Cuba, for instance, if it needs to be.
OK, Sandile Swana, South Africa governance specialist and political analyst, we really appreciate your time and your expertise. Thank you.
Thank you.
I thought it would be a while before I did another video on South Africa and US relations, but here we are again. Marco Rubio, the US's Secretary of State, is lashing out at Embrahim Rasool, who is South Africa's ambassador to the US. This is on social media, and it's in response to an article that quotes Rasool essentially criticizing Donald Trump and their understanding of the policies here in South Africa. Well, Rubio did not like that at all, calling Embrahim Rasool a race-baiting politician who hates Trump and says he is, quote, persona non grata. And in diplomatic terms, that usually means he has to leave America. Now, Rasool was tasked with improving relations between both countries. We know they deteriorated following the signing into law of the Land Act. But his efforts were seemingly fruitless because he was apparently shut out of Washington. Washington officials instead met with representatives from AfriForum.
I think what Donald Trump is launching is an assault on incumbency, those who are in power, by mobilizing a supremacism against the incumbency at home, and I think I've illustrated abroad as well. So in terms of that, the supremacist assault on incumbency, we see it in the domestic politics of the USA, the MAGA movement, the Make America Great Again movement, as a response, not simply to a supremacist instinct, but to very clear data that shows great demographic shifts in the USA, in which the voting electorate in the USA is projected to become 48% white, and that the possibility of a majority of minorities is looming on the horizon. And so that needs to be factored in so that we understand some of the things that we think are instinctive, nativist, racist things. I think that there's data that, for example, would support that, that would go to this wall being built, the deportation movement, etc., etc. So I think I mentioned that. I think that there is also an export of the revolution. It's no accident that that Elon Musk has involved himself in UK politics and elevated a Nigel Farage and the reform movement in much the same way that it was instructive that on his way to the Munich Security Summit, Vice President Vance addressed the Alternative für Deutschland to strengthen them in their election campaign. And that then begins to say, what was the role then of Afrikaners in that whole makeup? And very clearly, it's to project white victimhood as a dog whistle, that there is a global protective movement that is beginning to envelop embattled white communities, or apparently embattled white communities. It may not be true, it may not make sense, but that is not the dog whistle that is being heard in a global white base. So I think we need to understand all of that. Another discontinuity, it's almost that they are putting a supremacist insurgency against the incumbency, and therefore we need to rethink our old categories of rationalization, because in that category there are mainstream Republicans like Mitt Romney and so forth that are seen as part of the incumbency that are also embattled. And so it's an intra-party insurgency as well as a global insurgency.